Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are going on a massive, epic macro journey. We're tracing the cyclical engine of human progress. We're going to see exactly how the rise and fall, the wild ingenuity, and the relentless conquests of our past directly built the reality you are sitting in right this very second. Let's get into it. I mean, really think about it. How did we go from just tiny atoms floating around in some primordial petri dish to, drafting the Declaration of Independence? It is a truly staggering scope of human history, and that's exactly what we are unpacking today. So, to keep this whole journey logically structured, we've got a 5-part framework. We'll start with the dawn of civilizations, move into empires and philosophies, then faith and conquest, hit catastrophe and rebirth, and wrap up with the revolutions of the modern age. Okay, part 1, dawn of civilizations, moving from hunter-gatherers to structured societies. All right, so picture this. It's around 4000 BCE in Mesopotamia, and humanity makes this massive, game-changing shift. We figure out how to harvest cereal grains in Uruk, and suddenly we have a reliable food source, which means populations just absolutely explode. And just look at how rapidly the structural leaps happen right after that. By 3300 BCE, the Indus Valley civilization had highly advanced underground plumbing to literally prevent disease. Seriously, plumbing. And then, by 2589 BCE, the Egyptians were erecting the Great Pyramid of Giza. That is some incredible ingenuity in a relatively blink of an eye time span. But of course, settling down into these dense cities led to some incredibly rigid hierarchies. The Egyptian social pyramid is basically the perfect example of a society organized entirely to serve one single ruler. Way down at the bottom, you had peasants and slaves doing all the grueling manual labor. Just above them, the artisans, then scribes and soldiers, and then the bureaucrats near the top. And sitting way up above them all, the pharaoh, viewed literally as an immortal mediator between the gods and men. Now, to maintain order in these brand new hyper-complex societies, early civilizations relied on some incredibly strict and honestly unequal laws. Take King Hammurabi's legal system in Babylon back in 1772 BCE. The famous line, "If a man destroys the eye of another man, they shall destroy his eye." It's an undeniably harsh framework. It placed people into very strict castes and placed vastly different values on human life depending entirely, on what class you happen to be born into. Moving on to part 2, empires and philosophies, expansion and the birth of new ideas. So as these civilizations stabilized, basic survival gave way to some truly revolutionary ways of thinking. Take the rival Greek city-states, for example. On one hand, you've got Athens, experimenting with this highly complicated democracy. They used a council of 500, selected randomly by a literal machine, and this ushered in a brilliant cultural golden age. But then, on the flip side, you have Sparta, this absolute military powerhouse where young boys were taken from their families to become hardened soldiers. Two drastically different value systems completely clashing and yet coexisting in the exact same region. Meanwhile, over in Eastern philosophy, historical figures were starting to look inward. Around 500 BCE, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama witnessed the sheer, raw suffering of the human experience right outside his palace walls. He sought profound meaning, and he achieved enlightenment. This is defined as a state of inner peace transcending the limitations of the ego. He became known as the Buddha, offering a deeply personal answer to life's biggest, toughest questions. And we definitely have to look at another key philosophy here, the Chinese Mandate of Heaven, which was established during the Zhou dynasty. This was huge. It provided a cyclical, stabilizing framework for absolute dynastic rule. Basically, heaven grants the right to rule based entirely on the emperor's virtue. If he loses that virtue, the heavens send signs. Think catastrophic floods or famines, meaning no single dynasty has a permanent right to rule. It was essentially a brilliant way to justify the cyclical rise and fall of absolute rulers. And rule they absolutely did. This timeline perfectly tracks the unstoppable rise and the very sudden fall of ambitious conquerors who sought absolute global power. In 336 BCE, Alexander the Great, who was tutored by Aristotle himself, by the way, began conquering vast swaths of the known world, spreading Greek ideals before dying at just 32. Then, in 221 BCE, Jin Shi Huang unified a highly diverse China into one single empire under strict legalism. And over in Rome, Julius Caesar famously crossed the Rubicon, sparked a bloody civil war, and consolidated power as dictator for life, only to be, as we all know, assassinated by his own senators in 44 BCE. Power was absolute, sure, but it was often incredibly fleeting.
All right, part 3, faith and conquest, religious expansion and nomadic invasions.
Moving right into the medieval era, global history really starts being driven by the clash of monotheistic religions. Take the rapid spread of Islam, for instance. It all starts in 610 AD with Muhammad's revelations in a cave near Mecca. By 630 AD, Muslims had taken Mecca itself. And then, in just over a single century, by 716 AD, the Arab Empire had expanded an unbelievable distance, spanning all the way from Lisbon over to China. Just a massive global empire built with unprecedented speed. Okay, now check out this number, 8%. That is the estimated percentage of men in South Asia today who are descended directly from Genghis Khan. Let that sink in. The Mongol horde swept through the continent in the early 1200s, uniting millions under Khan. They ruthlessly destroyed empires, utilizing some pretty brutal psychological warfare along the way. It really highlights the staggering, almost unimaginable scale and the lasting genetic legacy of the Mongol conquests. Now, this era was also heavily defined by centuries of cyclical bloodshed during the Crusades. On one side, we have the Christian Crusaders, sparked by Pope Urban II back in 1095 to liberate Jerusalem from Muslim rule, all with the promise of spiritual rewards. On the other side, the Muslim defenders, united by legendary leaders like Saladin. In 1187, Saladin used vastly superior tactics in the scorching heat to declare a holy war and reconquer the city. This ideological and territorial clash of massive proportions raged back and forth for generations, completely defining the geopolitical landscape of the Middle Ages. Which brings us to part 4, catastrophe and rebirth, devastating resets and cultural awakenings. You know, sometimes profound global devastation paradoxically lays the groundwork for an awakening. 200 million, up to 200 million people died from the bubonic plague. This unimaginable loss of life completely devastated the globe. But in a really grim twist of historical fate, the sheer lack of surviving workers literally forced wealthy landowners to grant better rights and a larger share of the crops to the surviving working class. This catastrophe literally reshaped the economic balance of power. And from there, we see this incredibly rapid sequence of 15th century shocks. In 1431, the teenage visionary Joan of Arc is executed amidst the grueling Hundred Years' War. Then, boom, 1453, the monumental fall of Constantinople. The Ottomans used massive artillery to completely erase the very last remnant of the Roman Empire. And just a few decades later, in 1492, Christopher Columbus lands in the Americas, violently connecting two vastly different worlds and forever, permanently altering human history. Now, during this exact same era of rebirth, the Renaissance obviously brought forth brilliant art, but it also brought some incredibly sharp, brutal political pragmatism. Just listen to this chilling quote from Machiavelli's The Prince. "It is much safer to be feared than loved." Leaders of the time used pure dread to maintain their grip on power. They understood that fear preserved their empires far, far better than the fickle nature of love or loyalty ever could. And finally, part 5, revolutions of the modern age, from religious schisms to political revolutions. So, this is where those old medieval structures were completely, utterly shattered by individual thought and religious reformation. In 1517, Martin Luther's 95 Theses challenged the Catholic Church and officially sparked the Protestant Reformation. Then, in 1534, King Henry VIII just straight up created the Church of England because, well, he wanted a divorce. By 1618, these religious fractures ignited the devastating 30 Years' War across Europe. Meanwhile, over in Asia in 1644, the Manchu invasion ends China's Ming dynasty. Borders and deeply held beliefs were fundamentally shifting everywhere across the globe. All of these millennia of cyclical struggles for power eventually culminated in some profound paradigm shifts. On July 4, 1776, American patriots drafted the Declaration of Independence, boldly stating, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal." And right around that exact same time, Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations, laying the entire foundation for free market economics.
humanity had finally arrived at a world that was actually demanding individual rights and economic freedom. Wow, it has been a wild 6,000-year ride, hasn't it? The engine of civilization has brought us from ancient Mesopotamian farmers grinding wheat with stones all the way to the dawn of the modern world. We've watched empires rise and fall, philosophies clash, and dark catastrophes spark brilliant rebirths. Which really leaves us with one final provocative question. What will we build next? What is your place in this ongoing, cyclical story of human history? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer of our shared past. I really hope it gave you some incredible new perspective.